I hate it when my girlfriend going through my phone without me. When I was a teenager, my father had this habit, this invasive tendency, to check my phone out of the blue. To him, it might have seemed like a way to keep me safe, but to me, it was a constant source of anxiety, an ever-present threat that hung over my head. These moments filled me with dread, a creeping unease that made me feel as though I were teetering on the edge of a precipice, unsure of what might be discovered and how it might ripple through the fragile fabric of our lives. My father, strict and somewhat old-fashioned, didn't really understand the world of a teenager, the tangled mess of social interactions, the nuances of privacy. One particularly unforgettable day when I was 15, he stumbled upon something on my phone that made him deeply embarrassed and livid. I don't remember all the details of what it was, some awkward messages, perhaps, or a silly meme that adults could easily misinterpret, but I do remember his face. It contorted in a way I had never seen before, a blend of rage and humiliation. His reaction was immediate and explosive. He didn't keep it to himself. Instead, he decided to show his mother. My grandmother, who was stern and conservative, now became privy to the most private aspects of my teenage existence. It felt like my world was crumbling around me, a surreal nightmare where my inner thoughts and trivial teenage jokes were laid bare for the harsh scrutiny of the adults I had always revered and feared. That day remains etched in my memory as one of the most difficult and humiliating. The sheer intensity of their disappointment and upset was overwhelming. My father's anger and my grandmother's shocked disapproval were like a dark cloud that hung over me, casting a long shadow on my spirit. As if the situation couldn't get worse, my parents told the entire family about it. This was the cruelest blow. My favorite cousin, the one I had always confided in, turned the incident into fodder for jokes and jabs. The teasing was relentless, and even though it was likely meant to be in jest, it cut deep, leaving scars that would linger for years. My father's actions didn't stop at public shaming. He took a drastic step. He removed the door from my room. The door, a simple object, was my barrier, my shield against the world. Without it, I felt utterly exposed, like a prisoner under constant surveillance. I had no privacy. Every move, every thought felt scrutinized. My personal space, my sanctuary, was violated, and I was left with no place to retreat to, nowhere to feel safe or secure. Living under these conditions was like being stripped of my dignity. I felt naked, vulnerable, with no respite from the eyes that watched my every action. The removal of my door turned my room into a stage where every aspect of my life was on display. It wasn't just the physical lack of a door that was so devastating, it was the symbolism. It was a clear message. I had lost the right to my own space, to my own secrets. I tried to adapt, to find new ways to create privacy within the confines of my exposed bedroom. I would build little forts out of blankets, hiding inside them for hours, pretending they were impenetrable walls that could keep the world out. But they weren't. They were flimsy and transparent, just like my attempts to find solace and security in a home that no longer felt like my own. Friends would come over, and I'd have to awkwardly explain why my room had no door. Their sympathetic or puzzled looks made me feel even more isolated. It was like wearing a badge of shame, a constant reminder of my failure in my parents' eyes. My relationship with my friends suffered because I became reluctant to invite them over. I feared their judgment, the inevitable questions, and the pity that I saw in their eyes. The doorless room became a topic of gossip at school, and I became the subject of whispered conversations and sideways glances. When I finally got my phone back at 17, the emotional wounds were still raw and unhealed. The simple act of someone holding my phone for more than 10 seconds made my blood boil, sending my anxiety spiraling. It wasn't just about the phone, it was about the memories it triggered, the sense of vulnerability and exposure that came rushing back whenever anyone breached that personal space. My phone had become a symbol of autonomy, of the little bit of privacy I had fought so hard to reclaim. I tried to set boundaries, to explain to people, especially my girlfriend, why this was such a sensitive issue for me. She, however, couldn't quite grasp the depth of my trauma. She assumed I had something to hide, that my reluctance to let her access my phone freely was a sign of deception or wrongdoing. This misunderstanding created a rift between us, a gap that I struggled to bridge with explanations and reassurances that never seemed to be enough. I made a compromise for her sake. I agreed that we could go through my phone together as long as I was holding it. This included messages, deleted messages, social media, anything she felt she needed to look at to quell her suspicions. But there was a line I refused to cross: my photos. They were my last vestige of privacy, a personal space I couldn't bear to have invaded and judged. Each time she asked to see my photos, a wave of panic washed over me. It wasn't that I had anything to hide. It was the principle, the desperate need to keep some part of myself private and untouched by scrutiny. As we navigated this arrangement, the tension between us grew palpable. She didn't understand why I clung so fiercely to this shred of autonomy. To her, it was a matter of trust, and she saw my boundaries as a sign that I was hiding something. To me, it was a matter of preserving my sanity, of protecting the only piece of myself I felt I still had control over. Each time we went through my phone together, I could feel the anxiety gnawing at me, a reminder of those years spent under the unrelenting gaze of my father. This battle for my personal space became a recurring conflict in our relationship. Each time she reached for my phone without asking, each time she questioned my need for privacy, it brought back memories of those dark days of surveillance and shame. I would try to explain, to articulate the deep-seated fear and anxiety that gripped me, but my words often fell on deaf ears. She wanted reassurance, proof of my loyalty, while I wanted understanding and respect for my boundaries. The irony of it all was that there was nothing on my phone worth hiding. My reluctance wasn't about concealing secrets. It was about holding on to my sense of self, my dignity. The photos, messages, and apps were mundane, ordinary parts of my life, but they were mine. After years of having my privacy stripped away, I wasn't willing to give up that last bastion of personal space without a fight. Each time I held my ground, insisting on my right to keep my photos private, it felt like a small victory. A way to reclaim a piece of myself that had been lost in the turmoil of my teenage years. In the end, this issue became a defining struggle in our relationship. It was a clash of needs and perspectives, her need for transparency and reassurance, and my need for privacy and autonomy. Each confrontation brought us to the brink, forcing us to confront the deeper issues of trust, respect, and communication. It was a painful, often frustrating journey, but it also became a crucible that tested the strength of our bond. Looking back now, I see that those teenage experiences shaped me in ways I hadn't fully understood. They left me with a heightened sensitivity to issues of privacy and control, a wariness of intrusion that colored my interactions with others. They taught me the importance of setting boundaries, of standing up for my right to personal space, even when it meant facing misunderstanding and conflict. I remember the day my father handed my phone back to me. It felt like a momentous occasion, a small but significant step towards regaining my independence. I took the phone with a sense of trepidation, aware that it symbolized both freedom and the potential for renewed conflict. I had spent so long without it, relying on landlines and shared family computers, that it felt almost alien in my hands. I spent hours that night going through it, refamiliarizing myself with the apps and messages, cautiously rebuilding my digital life. But as I scrolled through old texts and photos, I was acutely aware of the scars that remained. I had developed a hyper-awareness of my digital footprint, constantly second-guessing every message I sent, every photo I saved. It was as if my father's scrutiny had embedded itself into my psyche, turning me into my own worst critic. Every notification felt like a potential threat, every beep and buzz a reminder of those years of surveillance and control. My friends, who had once taken my absence from social media in stride, now welcomed me back with open arms. They were curious, eager to hear about my experiences, but I found it difficult to share the full extent of what I had been through. I would smile and make light of it, downplaying the emotional toll it had taken on me. The jokes and teasing about my lack of a door had faded over time, replaced by a more genuine curiosity about how I had coped. But even as I reconnected with them, I felt a lingering sense of distance, a barrier that I couldn't quite overcome. My relationship with my parents remained strained. They seemed to believe that giving me back my phone was enough, that it signaled a return to normalcy. But the damage had been done, and our interactions were colored by a lingering resentment and mistrust. I struggled to rebuild our relationship, to find a way to forgive them for the pain they had caused. They, in turn, seemed bewildered by my reluctance to let go of the past, unable to understand why I couldn't simply move on. In time, I began to understand that my father's actions, though hurtful, had been motivated by a misguided sense of protection. He had wanted to shield me from harm, to control the aspects of my life that he couldn't understand, but in doing so, he had only driven me further away, creating a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. It took years of reflection, of painful conversations and tentative steps towards reconciliation, to begin to heal those wounds. I still carried the legacy of those years with me. The fear of intrusion, the anxiety around privacy, they have become ingrained in who I am. But they have also made me more empathetic, more aware of the importance of respecting others' boundaries. They have taught me the value of autonomy, of having control over my own life and my own space. And they have made me fiercely protective of the privacy of others, acutely aware of how easily it can be violated and how deeply those violations can wound. As I navigate my relationships now, I try to balance my need for privacy with the need for openness and trust. It's not always easy, and I often find myself struggling to explain my boundaries to others, but I have learned to stand firm, to assert my right to my own space and my own secrets. I have learned that it's okay to protect myself, to hold on to the things that make me feel safe and secure. This story, my story, is one of resilience in the face of violation, of finding strength in vulnerability, and of learning to reclaim a sense of self after being stripped of it. It's a testament to the enduring impact of those formative years, and a reminder that the scars we carry from the past can shape our present in profound and unexpected ways. It's a journey of healing, of understanding, and of learning to navigate the complex interplay between privacy and intimacy, control and trust, and it's a journey that continues, as I strive to build a life that respects my boundaries while allowing for the openness and connection that make life meaningful.